This is Distant Replay.
Well, we're back for another true crime sports episode of the Distant Replay podcast. And today, you'll hear the story of an NFL star whose 14-year career included a Super Bowl win, multiple All-Pro honors, and even a spot on the NFL's 2000 All-Decades team. When his playing career came to an end, he made the natural transition, as you would expect, into the media. But all that came to an end after rape and sexual assault allegations that spanned multiple years across multiple states. Today, we're going to tell you the details surrounding Darren Sharper. Welcome into Distant Replay. I'm Ben George. He's Mike Noto. And Mike, this is one we got requests for in terms of our true crime sports we've been doing a lot of and gotten a lot of feedback on YouTube. And it's kind of surprising, I guess, going back through this, there's not a ton out there.
Not a ton on Darren Sharper. Thank you very much for the recommendations we've been getting on different cases to look into and different true crime sports aspects to pursue. This one came up, like you said, in the comments. Started looking a little bit more into it. And this is another case of, I knew Darren Sharper was in jail. I knew he had gotten in some very serious trouble, but I was a little fuzzy on the details. And the details are eye-popping, to say the least.
Yeah, we're going to go through all those today on the show. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do so on whatever podcasting app you use. And also hit subscribe on YouTube there as well. We would appreciate that. So let's jump into Darren Sharper, Mike, and begin, as we always do, kind of with his early life, some background, and then into his playing career.
All right. So early life for Darren Sharper. Him and his brother Jamie went to Hermitage High School in Henrico County, Virginia. Both very big stars, as you can imagine, on the football field in high school. Jamie, most commonly known professional football-wise, by the way, for being on those early 2000s Ravens defenses. He was in a linebacking core with Ray Lewis and the boys there.
Okay.
So now, early life for Darren Sharper. Very active in sports, very active in extracurriculars, and was an honor roll student in high school. Okay. Graduates high school, superstar football player, but played mostly quarterback in high school. So what that leads to is that leads to him going to William and Mary. So a 1AA program at the time, not necessarily, where you expect, NFL dreams to be born, although they have had some NFL talent throughout the years. Mm-hmm. But he played mostly quarterback in high school. The coach at William & Mary convinces him, like, hey, look, if you become a defensive back, you're going to increase your chances at making the pros. So instead of making that transition after college, like a lot of guys do, he actually made it early on in his college career, and it paid off for him. He was a 3-time all-conference selection, 2-time All-American at William & Mary, and he was also the conference's defensive player of the year as a senior. So very decorated college career. You see a lot of times, especially defensive backs, if they're really good defensive backs and they have the size like Sharper did, I think it was like 6'2", 230, they could definitely get drafted. It's not completely out of the realm for this level of football players to get drafted.
Right.
He ends up getting drafted in the second round overall in the 97 draft. So 60th overall by the Packers in the 97 draft, who are coming off a Super Bowl win the year before. You remember that game, right, Ben?
Yeah, that's a great spot to land.
I couldn't have put it any better. Awesome spot to land. Packers, late 90s. We actually did a complete episode on the game that would end Darren Sharper's rookie year.
Right.
His rookie year, Packers make it to the Super Bowl, lose to the Broncos. So, again, this is a guy who's in the limelight as a player, coming into the league on the Packers, the Brett Favre-led Packers, right at the beginning of his career. Sharper's career would span 14 years overall. He would make stops with the Packers, then to the Vikings, and then lastly to the Saints. Sharper had a very unique career in a lot of ways, but one way I think, Ben, was he was a notable player on 3 different defenses from the safety position. His career spanned 14 years, which is definitely on the high end for defensive backs. And at all 3 stops, he was on good teams.
Yeah, that his career, and I think of him mainly as a Packer, probably, maybe the Saints, because that's where he won a Super Bowl with the Saints there. But yeah, I mean, you look at his career and all his honors and accolades. I mean, it's pretty balanced between all 3 stops. So he's a guy that played at a high level basically from the day he walked into the league until he left.
Yeah, I mean, look, he won a Super Bowl in year 13 with the Saints. In year 13 with the Saints, he had 71 tackles, 15 pass deflections, and 9 interceptions.
Jeez.
This is his 13th year in the league.
It's impressive.
It is. And overall, he made the Pro Bowl 5 times, was a 2-time first-team All-Pro, and a 4-time second-team All-Pro. Led the league in interceptions twice. Something I did not recall was that he was on the NFL All-Decade 2000s team.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it is a lot of times with these All-Decade teams, it matters when your career falls. He happened to be in his prime and play the entire decade of the 2000s. So, I mean, I know that helps, but still, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, but you look at who he's paired with. I mean, that's a pretty impressive company on that decade team.
It is. Yeah. And anytime you see someone makes an all-decade team, it pops out to you, right?
Yeah.
Sixth all-time in interceptions at the time of his retirement, 63. He's tied for the most defensive touchdowns of all time at 13. So this is a guy that, look, not a lot of safeties make the Hall of Fame. Preface it by saying that. If you just look at the list of number of safeties all time that are in the Hall of Fame, there's not a lot of them.
Right.
But he has a legit Hall of Fame candidacy case.
I just say I'll point right to this all decades team from the 2000s. First team was Brian Dawkins and Ed Reed. Second team was Troy Polamalu and Darren Sharper. 3 of those 4 are in the Hall of Fame.
Couldn't have put it any better. So if you're that's a really good way to put a pin in it and to show. And the point with going through this, his pro career and his football career, was just to show you how good of a player he was. I mean, I know for me, I realized he was a very good player, but when you're talking top 4 safeties in a decade, especially on a list with those other 3 guys you mentioned, Hall of Famers, kind of puts a bow on the type of level of stardom we're dealing with Darren Sharper, which I think would have an impact on how his crimes were treated a little bit later in his life.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you're talking about a star that was towards the top of the game for more than 10 years, and that, as we know, is very difficult to do in the NFL. To sustain that level of play, stay healthy, compete against the younger guys, over that course of time, that speaks a lot to what kind of player he was. But as you mentioned, that has an impact on the post-career.
Yep, so post-career. Darren Sharper's last game in the NFL was the Marshawn Lynch Beast Mode wildcard game in Seattle when Sharper was a member of the Saints. You remember that game, Ben?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that was Sharper's last game as a pro. After that, he becomes an analyst for NFL Network. So that sort of sets the scene for what he's doing post-career. Like a lot of legendary NFL players do, he moves to the media, specifically for the NFL Network. Now, what I'm going to do now, Ben, is list his crimes that took place from February 2nd, 2013 until January 15th, 2014. So we're talking about a little bit less than a year.
Right.
All right. Before I get to those crimes, very shortly after he retired, on March 18, 2011, is when we look back on the case of Darren Sharper, is really when he began to get on law enforcement's radar. In March 18th of 2011, 2 women are out in Georgia on spring break. They file a report with police alleging that Darren Sharper and his brother Jamie Sharper sexually assaulted them at Darren's Miami condo. No charges are end up being filed in this case because the doctor's exam found no case of sexual battery. And because of that, the rape kits in that case were never even examined.
Right, which is a shame.
It is a shame, especially when when we're about to go through what, the life of crime and the period of crime Darren Sharper would engage in. This all could have been potentially nipped in the bud right here in 2011.
Yeah, and look at the reports from that case. And again, like when you look at these true crime episodes we do, and a lot of times it spans multiple incidents or allegations in many cases, and you always look back to that early moment, and there's so many things that you point to and get, man, things could have maybe been stopped at this point. And you look at that case, like the investigation was closed after 5 days. They didn't visit his condo. Like they didn't do a whole lot of investigative work into that case. And to your point, it's probably because you're talking about a guy that's just finished off this decorated NFL career, is becoming an analyst, getting that platform, and now he's speaking out. He's in a high-profile position.
Yeah, this is literally 2 months after he retired. So in the timeline, that brings us to February 2nd, 2013. This is the beginning of those spree of crimes I talked about earlier that spanned almost exactly a year. Okay. The first one of these incidents in 2013, the Super Bowl is in New Orleans. Darren Sharper and one of his friends, Brandon Liccardi, who is a name you'll hear here a couple times as we go along. He's a St. Bernard Parish sheriff deputy, so a member of law enforcement at this time also. They're accused of drugging a woman, and Liccardi is accused of sexually assaulting her. And this is the first time and it'll become a common theme, where we hear of victims alleging they were drugged, and then following that up with them being sexual assaulted by either Sharper or an accomplice. And in this case, it's Brandon Liccardi. Again, like I said, the St. Bernard Parish Sheriff Deputy.
Jeez. Okay.
Next in the timeline, August 31st, 2013, Sharper allegedly rapes another woman in New Orleans.
All right.
No reports of the drugging of this woman. But again, another incident here in New Orleans. September 23rd, 2013, Sharper, Liccardi, and another accomplice named Eric Nunez allegedly drug and rape two women. One of those women ends up filing a report with the New Orleans Police Department. So just in New Orleans, from February to September of 2013, we have him being accused of crimes that include drugging women and being involved in the rape of women. And we're talking about 4 women at this time.
And a couple of them involve Liccardi, who's, as you mentioned, a sheriff's deputy at that point.
Yeah, so it's almost like these two are working, it seems like, in tandem, essentially.
Right.
Working to drug and rape women. And who knows if Liccardi is leveraging his position as a law enforcement professional in any way during all of this, okay? One of those women, as I said, files a report with the New Orleans Police Department. In October 2013, now we're in West Hollywood, California. So we're bringing the scene of the crimes to a different state now. We're in Louisiana, now we're in California. Sharper allegedly drugs 2 women, takes them to his hotel room, and rapes one of them.
Jeez.
About a week later, on November 7th of 2013, one of those women from West Hollywood goes and files charges against Darren Sharper. Okay, so we have charges filed in New Orleans, and we have charges filed in West Hollywood.
Okay.
And presumably investigations to go along with those, to investigate those charges.
And we're still talking about the calendar year 2013.
We are. Yep.
Jeez.
Now, less than 2 weeks later, November 20th, 2013, the scene shifts to Arizona, 3rd state now. Sharper drugs 3 Arizona State students and rapes 2 of them. And one of the main differences that's brought up in this case is that the victims got sexual assault exams pretty much right away. Okay. And after that, they filed charges with the Tempe police.
This is the one I think that I remember the most, kind of. And I don't know that it was just I was paying attention a little bit more, or if this one was made more of a big deal out of, because, as you mentioned, that the victims getting those exams right away, and then this became a bigger story because, hey, the pattern's here. But this is the one that thinking back on it, this is the one that I can kind of remember the most out of all of them.
Okay. Now, so Ben, we're spanning across 3 states here now, right? On January 14th, 2014, so we're into the calendar year 2014, we're back in West Hollywood at the same club. So the incident before in West Hollywood, Sharper had picked women up from a club. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, and brought them back into his hotel, drugged them, and raped them. Okay. Mm-hmm. January 14, 2014, Sharper goes and picks up 2 women at the same West Hollywood nightclub, drugs both of them, and rapes one of them. The victims also, in this case, report to LAPD and get sexual assault exams done in relatively short order. What I don't get in this case is, all right, so the other incident in West Hollywood, one of the victims filed charges in that. I'm guessing that someone in that club had to have been questioned, since Sharper was allegedly there that night as well. So how did they let him into the club in January, first of all?
Yeah.
And how did they let him, let's just stop there. How did they let him back in that club to eventually do the same thing he did a couple months earlier? It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. That's something that really stuck out to me, that he was doing this stuff at the same club. The next night, January 15, 2014, now we're going to a 4th state in Nevada, specifically the city of Las Vegas. Sharper meets 2 women and a man at a Las Vegas club. So it's the first time we're dealing with a man being involved, as far as Sharper drugging all 3 of them and assaults both women.
Jeez.
Okay. So this is where sort of the rapes and the assaults and the druggings that we know about stop. From February 2nd, 2013 until January 15, 2014, again, upwards of 16 victims are alleging that he either drugged them, assaulted them, or both. And again, we have to put in the mix as well. There are accomplices involved here in the New Orleans cases with Liccardi and Nunez.
Yeah.
All right. So this leads us to January 17th, 2014, literally 2 days after the assaults in Las Vegas and 3 days after the second assaults in West Hollywood. On January 17, 2014, the LAPD arrests Darren Sharper on 2 counts of sexual assault. So this is the first police department to do an investigation, to follow up on it, and to actually arrest Darren Sharper. So four different jurisdictions at this point have open and active, case files on him, for lack of a better way to put it. And the LAPD is the first one to act on it on January 17, 2014. The following month, on February 27th, 2014, the New Orleans Police Department issues arrest warrants for Sharper on 2 rape counts. So now we have 4 counts total, 2 sexual assault, 2 rape. The next day, on February 28th, he's officially fired from the NFL Network. Now, what I couldn't get is after the LAPD arrest, did they take him off the air and just officially fire him on February 28th? But regardless, he officially no longer works for the NFL Network on February 28th of 2014. Okay. So remember, we have allegations in 4 states. As of now, we have charges brought in 2 states. In March of 2014, the third state comes on board, being Arizona. He gets charged with 2 counts of administering drugs and 2 counts of sexual assault. So this is the first case where the administering of drugs and drugging people come into the equation, which would play a role in his charges later on, which is why I mention it.
Okay.
So now all the charges being levied end here in March 11th of 2014. The next charges by a U.S. attorney come in December 12th of 2014 when they announce a 6-count indictment against Darren Sharper and Liccardi. Remember his buddy that was the law enforcement, the sheriff's deputy? Then local New Orleans authorities file similar charges against Sharper and Liccardi, but with Nunez added in. So the second accomplice now added into those charges. On March 20th, 2015, going back now to Nevada, the last state to file sex assault charges against Sharper, they filed 2 sex assault charges against him. So now he has charges pending in all 4 states: California, Arizona, Louisiana, and Nevada. So what Sharper's attorney does, and remember, he has the ability to hire these very, very high-priced attorneys, obviously, given his status from his playing days and the money he made. His attorney strikes what they call a global plea deal, which I didn't know that you could do this. Have you ever heard of this, Ben?
No, I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So essentially what they do is get all 4 jurisdictions to combine their charges into one plea. So the attorney goes to him and says, look, my client will take a plea deal, but we want to encompass all the charges into one plea deal.
Gotcha.
Now, could you even make a guess at what would be an appropriate sentence at this time for, now remember, he's brought up on, just to put it generally, 9 rapes at this point. Like he could have as many as 16 victims as we went through, but he's brought up on charges for 9 rapes that I've outlined, 9 rapes and sexual assaults.
Yeah, at this point, he's being considered a serial sexual predator, right? At this point.
He is. I mean, could you even put a number to what this plea deal would come to? I mean, for me, it would minimally start at like 30 years for me. If not
I was
more.
going to say maybe 20.
I look at all these
I have no
individually.
idea,
if you prosecuted these each individually, I mean, I would assume you could at least get 10 years for each, right? At least.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but yeah, it seems like that would be a fair guess.
Well, to a lot of people's surprise, they negotiate a plea agreement where he only gets 9 years in prison.
Jeez.
So all of those charges I just outlined during that year spree he went on, he gets 9 years.
Wow.
Now, in May of 2015, to this district court judge's credit in Louisiana, she says, look, I guess the courts have to approve the plea deals. So basically the attorneys say, hey, we agreed to this. We'd like you to accept the plea deal, right? Both sides agreed. the Louisiana District Court judge basically says, look, that sentence is way too short. Like, this sentence for him should be in the 15 to 20 year range minimally, which I even think maybe is maybe too short, but that's what she says. In August of 2016, he's then resentenced, and his sentence is changed to 20 years in prison. And that's the length of the term he's currently in jail on right now.
Okay. So 20 years.
20 years sentence in August of 2016. Now, Ben, this begs some questions here following all the charges, all of the plea deal I just mentioned. Some questions naturally come to mind. So, brought up on charges for 9 rapes, but there could be as many as 16 victims, as I said. How did he go from February 2nd, 2013 to January 17, 2014, with all these active investigations going on in 4 different jurisdictions, and not get charges brought against him sooner?
I mean, I would assume that anybody that listens to this is thinking the exact same thing. You've got to take it. You got to step in and intervene, even if there's not enough going on there. You think there's got to be something that you have to do to slow this down, because we're seeing these charges all across the country over the course of just like 8 or 9 months.
And it makes you think naturally, like, okay, so after the charges are filed in California, right? They're filed in California on January 17th, and then a month later, they're filed in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. So that these different jurisdictions take their cue, kind of, and then in March, the charges are filed in Arizona. So once LA filed the charges officially, or once LA, arrested him officially, did that give the other jurisdictions like, okay, now we'll move forward?
Yeah.
Like, what's a kind of a domino effect in that way? But I think that's the natural question anyone listening to this is going to ask. What took so long?
Do we have any answers for that?
We don't have any definitive answers. We can speculate based on past cases. We can sort of draw some conclusions by the evidence that we have. And in just reading what a lot of experts think is that, look, when you're Darren Sharper, you're a high profile client, right? You have access to very big time lawyers. And before they file charges involving someone who's represented by these kind of lawyers, the prosecutors want to make sure they have an airtight, solid case. Mm-hmm. And some of the issues in these cases was it was hard to prove a lot, because Sharper in most of the cases, but also with Liccardi involved, how they went about their crimes. Okay. Because they drug the women. And when that happens, unfortunately, a lot of times the women can't remember what happened. Mm-hmm. Right. And the thinking was that might have been an intentional move by Sharper and Liccardi to sort of, when the women went to the police, they lost credibility with the cops when they couldn't remember anything. Okay. Yeah. So that's one reason why charges may not have been filed. The thinking is right away. Okay. Or 2 reasons, I should say: the issue with the lawyers and the issue that maybe the victims couldn't remember as much because they've been drugged.
Right.
That's why those exams that I mentioned earlier, how when I went through the crimes, I mentioned the crimes after which the victims got exams in short order.
Yep.
Well, that sort of, for lack of a better way to put it, does speaking for them, right? They have those exams to prove they were sexually assaulted. It's not their word versus Darren Sharper's word.
Yeah.
Okay. Another thing that made it hard to arrest him sooner was he was a little bit sophisticated in the way he did things, and that he traveled to commit the crimes. And it made it hard to detect. It made it hard to sort of link the cases together. And there's people that think that was a very conscious thing that Sharper did. And I don't blame them for thinking that, because if you look at even just that period of time from November 20th through January 15th, he has 3 different incidents in 3 different states, mm-hmm. culminating with an incident in January 14th in West Hollywood, followed by January 15th the next night in Las Vegas. So those are some of the thinkings and the reasons why maybe why there was a delay in filing these charges. But people, and I don't blame them, really get fixated on the fact that, well, this is a celebrity and he's kind of held to a different standard than the everyday person would be.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't blame him for thinking that in this case.
No.
Because if you're not charging someone with crimes because you're intimidated a little bit maybe by their attorneys, well, they're able to hire those attorneys because of the money they have and the power they have.
Right. Yeah, they're definitely held to a different standard. In many cases, fair or not, it's just the way kind of life is.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, Ben. I'm a little bit surprised there hasn't been a documentary on this yet.
Yeah, I mean, now that you mention it with all these details, yeah. And I don't know how many people are aware of all the details. I think people kind of know what happened with him and the cases that were brought and the charges that were brought, but I don't know that anybody knows kind of this timeline that was laid out today. So, yeah, maybe it's coming down the road. Who knows?
Yeah, because you look at the way they do these documentaries. I mean, there's the spree of crimes aspect to it. There's the, hey, why didn't law enforcement act on their investigation sooner? There's the celebrity aspect of it. I just would think that it'd be a candidate for a documentary. I found a lot of news stories on it. NOLA.com, which is like the local New Orleans newspaper website,
Right.
did a lot of investigating on this because, again, he was very well known from his time with the Saints and spent time there later in his career. And a lot of these crimes happened in Louisiana as well. And there's a lot of different sources on the internet to find out information about the case, but I couldn't find much video, anything in documentary form. And, I wanted to be able to fill in the gaps on what happened and found some different timelines that sort of, crystallize things. But other than that, there's not much on them.
Right. I guess it's worth mentioning that he did try to appeal the sentence, right? Which was ultimately rejected.
He did. Yeah, he tried to appeal. It was rejected, like you mentioned. So he's serving the 20 years in prison that we discussed before.
Wow.
So just a terrible story all around.
Right.
Again, I mean, for him to only get 20 years for 9 sexual assault and rape charges is pretty eye-opening.
Sure is. Well, this episode's been very eye-opening, and it's one that I was aware of, but not the full details, and appreciate you kind of breaking that down for us, Mike. But I want to thank everybody, too, that sent in the recommendation for this topic as well. If you have any other ones, send them over to us. We'll do the research. Mike loves going down the wormhole of true crime, not just sports, but any of it. So he enjoys doing it, and we enjoy talking about it, and we appreciate you listening to it. While you're here, hit subscribe, please, on the podcast or on YouTube, whichever platform you're listening on, and connect with us on Twitter, Instagram, as well. And you can find us everything online. DistantReplayPodcast.com is our website. We put all the games up there that we watch. They're up on our website. You can go back and watch them yourself there as well. Mike, appreciate it, man. Enjoyed, I say enjoy on these episodes. I feel bad saying that, but I enjoy sitting down with you and going through these things, but don't enjoy the actual details.
Yeah, the details on these cases, Ben, are very hard to swallow. Again, the victims in these cases deserve a ton of credit for coming forward when they do and bringing these people to justice. And I'm glad it happened in this case with Darren Sharper. And look, can't thank people enough for listening to these. And as long as you keep listening, as I always say, we'll keep putting them up. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for listening to Distant Replay. We'll be back again with another full episode. We got Tiger Woods documentary recap going on right now, plus more games in the pipeline and more true crime sports. So hit subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.